Here we go, we got a little bit. Here, I'll pull up the screen. Yes, yellowdrive.com. It's like the best. This guy still updates every day. I'm pretty sure he actually puts money into it. A lot of like court transcripts and whatnot. It's funny. I forgot that Bobby Beausoleil is in Vacaville too. So, local news here. Bobby Beausoleil granted parole. Vacaville, January 7th. Bobby Beausoleil was found suitable for parole at a hearing today. The California Board of Parole Hearings. Beausoleil, 77 years old now. Man, that's gotta suck. Is serving a term of 7 years to life. Jesus. Terms or like sentences are so fucking weird. 7 years to life. For the 1969 murder of Gary Hinman. He was recommended for parole in 2019, but that's the big question. So in 2019, he was also granted parole, but Gavin Newsom reversed the grant due to the heinous nature of the crime and Beausoleil's limited insight regarding it. He was denied parole in 2020 and 2022, but successfully petitioned the Superior Court to vacate those hearings. Beausoleil was tried twice for the murder of Hinman, first in November of 1969, which ended in a hung jury. That's kind of crazy. I didn't even know that. And again in 1970 when he was convicted of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to death on April 15th, 1970, but obviously that was committed to life in prison in 72 when the death penalty was temporarily abolished in California. So I think Gavin Newsom's gonna deny. Um, I think he's gonna deny this. Gavin Newsom has denied every person who's ever been, every person who's ever been related to the Manson story. Gavin Newsom denies them parole. Leslie Van Houten was just let out last year. So what happened with her though was that she was recommended for parole and then Gavin Newsom denied it. But then I guess the appellate court denied Gavin Newsom's denial. And then I apparently, from what I understand, that goes back to Gavin Newsom, and he has the choice to either deny it again or just let it go, and he just let it go. Um, I think obviously Gavin Newsom doesn't want to be known as the guy that lets Manson family members free, so that makes sense to every person whenever they come up for parole, he denies them. You know, that article said that, Newsom cited as reason for denial in 2019 was, but his limited insight regarding the nature of the crimes. I don't think that's the truth. I think he gets the paper that says, "Here's Bobby Beausoleil," and he probably reads the name Charles Manson on the paper and immediately stamps that shit and denies it. There's no way he actually looks into it or gives a fuck. Um, so yeah, I think Newsom will deny it, and then after that, I guess it'll be up to the Court of Appeals if they're going to deny Newsom's denial or keep him in there. At this point, he's 77. Like, I don't know. I have a hard time seeing a 77-year-old being like a threat. But at the same time, some people should be in prison for the rest of their life. Um, Beausoleil is kind of a weird character. The murder that he committed is super weird. It's because he was the first guy. He committed the murder, and he was the first guy to do all of the like, he smeared his blood all over the walls and wrote "pig" in his blood, which apparently was him trying to make the murder scene look like a murder that was committed by a Black Panther. I don't know if you know the Black Panthers in the '60s, that, like, militant, I think they would call themselves, like, a Black Power, like a civil rights group, but they were very, like, violent and militant. It was kind of gang-like, and they were running around at the time, and they used a lot of these, like, political buzzwords like "pig." So Bobby Beausoleil kills Gary Hinman and then writes, I think he wrote "pig." I don't know if it was political piggy or piggy, he wrote stuff on the wall in his blood, trying to make it look like a Black Panther did it. I think that it just scares him letting them out without looking into it. Yeah, I think he just doesn't wanna be known as the guy that let Manson people go? Um So that's kinda weird though that Leslie Van Houten was always gonna be the first one to get out because she is the prettiest of the 3 girls that were arrested for it, and she looks the most innocent, so it was the most believable that she would get to go first. Um, Political piggy. Yeah, yeah. I think that's what Bo Sully wrote. Like I said, I don't remember if he wrote Political Piggy or Pig. If you're telling me he wrote Political Piggy, then I totally would believe you with the paw print. Yeah, yeah, the paw print, making it look like the Black Panther thing. But when from any, like, documentary or interview I've seen with him, he's, of course, very, "Oh, I don't really remember." He talks about how he was kinda just in a daze, but I don't think I really believe him. Like, I really can't make up my mind on Beausoleil. I tend to lean toward dirtbag, but, I don't know. I tend to, I mean, he got caught driving Gary Hinman's car, which to me would show kind of a no, I guess I don't wanna say a lack of remorse, but usually if you kill somebody and you're remorseful and feel bad about it, I don't think you're I don't think you're just gonna be out driving their car a week later. But, yeah, regardless, I think Newsom's gonna she was suing the state of California. That's why he let her go, basically. What was she suing California over? I think, I still think we're gonna get a documentary at some point. I think we're gonna get a Leslie Van Houten documentary, and because it's 2025, she's gonna claim that she was, taken advantage of by Manson because he was a man. It's gonna go that whole route. She's gonna be, she was, manipulated, and, and she's I don't know, I don't wanna say, strong, independent woman, but I think she's gonna go that route. I think we're still gonna get the Leslie Van Houten documentary, and it's gonna be all about her, her abortion when she was younger and how Manson came along and took advantage of her. She was a vulnerable young woman. I tend to think all of those people made their own choices. I talk about it all the time. I don't really I don't not into the cult leader thing. Casper, what's your, out of the big theories about the whole story, what's the one that you go with? I heard she's gonna write a book. Oh, yeah, she'll definitely write a book. She'll definitely write a book. But yeah, what's the one that you go with? What do you tend to lean toward? Um, I tend to, well, not tend to, but I definitely lean toward, I think the name it usually goes by is the drug burn theory, but I think it's a lot more than, drug burn is really selling it short, but, you know, to me, it seems reasonable that it was just all drug dealing. I think most of it was Tex. I don't think Manson handled anything very intelligently, but I certainly don't think he was any kind of cult leader that told anybody to go do anything. I think his words kinda get twisted around a lot, like him telling Beausoleil to handle his shit like a man. That doesn't mean fucking kill anybody, that just means handle your shit like a man. Same thing with Tex. But, yeah, so now the next one, I think I read that Krenwinkel might be up this year. She might be up for another shot, and I think if Beausoleil gets out, now that Van Houten is out, and then, if Beausoleil gets out, it would be kinda weird if they kept Patricia Quen I can't say her full name ever. It would be weird if they kept Patricia Krenwinkel in prison after letting those 2 out. So I would imagine that that would be my bet. If Beausoleil gets out, I'd bet like $5 they'll let Krenwinkel out whenever she gets up again. I don't think Tex Watson will ever get let out, and I don't think he should ever get let out. She will never get let out. Okay, so but what about if Beausoleil gets let out? You think even if Beausoleil gets out, they won't let Krenwinkel out? Because to me, I don't know, that would just look I think that would just kinda look weird. It would make them, Krenwinkel is, I would say, the most, like, conventionally, like, not attractive out of the bunch. She's always looked a little bit, rough around the edges, and I think people might start thinking, that could just be me overthinking this shit. People might be thinking, "Oh, they're not letting her go because she's not pretty like Leslie Van Houten." Maybe Bruce Davis. I could see Bruce Davis getting out. I feel like the lesser known people, the more chance they have of getting out, and Bruce Davis is definitely one of the lesser known characters of the story. That's part of the reason I think they probably, like, there's a decent chance that Beausoleil gets let out. I said I think Newsom will deny it, but I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't, just because not a lot of people really know who Bobby Beausoleil is unless they're, like, into the whole story. I If Beausoleil gets out, I am more surprised that Van Houten got out than I would be surprised if Beausoleil gets out. It's, like, the way that I would put it. I kinda figured they would never let Van Houten out. I figured they'd never let Krenwinkel out. I always thought they wouldn't let Susan Atkins out. Obviously, there's no chance of that now, but, because the public sees her as one of the most dangerous people of the bunch, which is funny because I don't think that's true at all. I think she was just an edge lord who lied about a lot of stuff. I don't think she actually killed anybody. I think she was just young and she wanted to be known as a hard ass. When is Yeah, yeah, Bobby Beausoleil is, for as not as well known as he is, he's one of the first. There's like a chain of events that sets off the Manson murders, which should be called the Watson Kasabian murders. But, Beausoleil is like one of the first links to that chain. He commits the second murder, or no, the first murder. He commits the first murder in that string. Bobby was locked up when Tate LaViolette were murdered. Yeah, Bobby Beausoleil really committed the first murder in that whole, thing, because Manson didn't actually kill Bernard Crowe. That was the first event, was the shooting of Bernard Crowe, but, I'm trying to find Bruce Davis on this page now. When does Bruce Davis get another shot? Um, Over here on CieloDrive.com. 69, Bruce was present. When Bruce is in prison for Shorty Shea's murder, right? He was there for, Donald Shea's murder. I would imagine that's what he was charged with. I have looked into Bruce Davis, like, the least. I really haven't looked into the story in a while, actually. I've been kinda out of it for a little bit. But then once I heard the Shorty Shea murder. But then once I heard the news that, Bo Slater got granted parole, which was, just yesterday, or it might have been the day before that I heard it. I don't remember fucking 2 hours ago, let alone 2 days ago. Yeah, I haven't looked into shit for a while. Um, and yeah, the whole Donald Shorty Shea murder, that's also, like, one of the lesser known things of the story. See, I could see Bruce Davis getting let out for sure, just because I think, if Newsom wants to avoid being known as the guy who lets out the Manson people, it's pretty safe to let out Bruce Davis and Bobby Beausoleil. I bet you whenever they do get let out, though, there's probably all these rules. They're not allowed to talk to anybody of the a lot of the jokes in some of the Facebook groups have been like, "Oh, I wonder if Bobby and Leslie will get back together now." People are saying, no, they're probably not allowed to have any communication with each other, which is silly because that implies that they were a cult, but which, I don't believe. I don't think it was any kind of cult. I think they were all just hanging out. I think the girls were, enjoyed acting like fucking weirdos in front of the cameras, and that certainly didn't help their cause, but no, I don't think it was any kind of cult. Why do you think, Casper, why do you think Krenwinkel would never get out? You don't think they'd ever let her go? You think they'd let out Van Houten, but they wouldn't let out Krenwinkel? I'm sure the rules are fucking crazy if they get let out. Yeah, but man, being on parole in general sounds kinda miserable, let alone if you're like a notorious murderer or somebody who's known as a notorious murderer, I don't think all of the girls actually killed people. I think Tex did all the killing. I'm sure at least one of the girls helped out. I don't know. Being in one of those houses that night, that would be like like in the episode of that '70s show where the angel takes Eric around to see, like, different parts of his life in the future, or, like, what is it? He never gotten with Donna, something like that. If an angel could come down and take me back to '69 and, like, let me kind of float around the house while this stuff was going on, be super curious about all that. I'd mostly be curious to hang out on the ranch. I'm always bummed out that we really get none of Manson's music, like, properly recorded, and we really get no videos of him. I don't wanna say in his prime, but in his 30s. Really, all the pictures and videos of him we have are when he was in prison. She stabbed Abigail Folger, actually chased her down and stabbed her. Oh, Krenwinkel? I have to go back to my question since you seem to be well versed in this. What is kind of like the theory that you lean toward? There's the love of brother theory, the helter skelter. Uh, do you get into Tom O'Neill's MK Ultra theory? For like the most full like disclosure, I have the Manson file, by Nicholas Schreck. So honestly, anything Nicholas Schreck has ever said about the story, I pretty much am down with. Again, I haven't read the book in a long time. I have not brushed up in a while, but I tend to lean toward everything that I think he's done the best research on the story that anybody has. So when you talk about Krenwinkel, stabbing Abigail Folger, I mean, I could see that. I feel like I read something. I don't remember if it was in that book or if he said it in an interview, but I feel like I remember him saying something about Krenwinkel being particularly violent because she kind of always felt outcasted throughout her life. Something like that. Something about how she was never the conventionally pretty girl, and so she kind of seemed to be a little bit bitter toward somebody like an Abigail Folger. But again, like I said, I don't remember if I read that or if I heard someone say that or what, but yeah, that would make sense to me. I think, I don't think Susan Atkins really did all that much damage. I think she just did a lot of talking. I think she went along for the ride, and I think she tried to talk herself up in prison. She tried to be cool for the interviews. She wanted to seem like this, kinda siren type killer, but I don't think she was really all that badass. I also think Linda Kasabian probably got in on some of the violence because I think Linda Kasabian and Tex Watson are the 2 main villains of the story. They're the ones that they're the ones that were doing all the drug dealing and all the stealing and whatnot, getting them into these situations. Now that I say that Susan Atkins probably never got in on the violence, I do believe that she was probably doing meth with Tex Watson on that first night, maybe with her all methed out. Because I think that's like one of the most important parts of the story, at least as far as like at the Tate house, was that Tex was all methed out, and that's a lot of those. I think it's more the Watson murder. Yeah, yeah, exactly. They should be called the Watson. I would say the Watson Kasabian murders. But yeah, it's Tex Watson is kind of the main perpetrator. I think that if Tex Watson had been there for the first trial with Manson and the girls, I honestly don't think Manson would have gone to prison, at least not for life. I think Tex Watson would have been he would have been the guy that goes to prison. That would be a crazy alternate universe, though, if Watson had been there for the initial trial, because Manson is he would have gotten all the, the publicity just because naturally you put Manson in a courtroom and he's gonna take up all the air in the room. But if Watson had been there, checking in the best stream tonight. What's up? Why not? I agree. Yeah, yeah. Tex Watson would have gone to prison for life, which I mean he is now, but he would have been the main boogeyman. But then when I say the main boogeyman, you know, that's kind of a hard thing to assume because Manson's a crazy motherfucker if you don't really understand the guy. Yeah, yeah, Tex was doing meth the night that he went over. That's why so when they went over to Manson's got too much swag for someone else to take the blame. Yeah, that's the thing. Do you think Trump and Manson would get along? No, there's a comment I read. There's a guy that I follow on Instagram that was friends with Manson, and he had it's crazy to think that Manson lived through like a year of Donald Trump's presidency. Um, One, Manson was an environmentalist, so he would definitely hate Donald Trump's, drilling for oil. Donald Trump doesn't seem to care about the environment. And he made some comment to this guy that I follow where he made some joke about, he said, "This guy, Donald Trump, he wants to build a wall along the Mexican border, but he doesn't even know where Mexico actually is." So no, Manson would not like Trump. Manson also wouldn't like Biden or Kamala. The only politician I've ever really heard Manson talk about that he seemed to like was George Washington. I know he had like a deep respect for the founding fathers. That's like his big thing. He liked the founding fathers. He did not like Abraham Lincoln. He thought Abraham Lincoln was kind of a dirtbag. Which I've read a lot of crazy different things about Abraham Lincoln in recent months. There's a couple books I want to get. Apparently, depending on who you ask, Abraham Lincoln was not actually the great hero that he was made out to be. Yeah, no, Manson wouldn't like Trump at all. He would not be down with Trump's handling of the environment. Manson was a big environment guy. That's his whole thing. What was I saying before that? Oh yeah, Protomax. The comment about meth made him do crazy stuff. Yeah, the first night when they went to Sharon Tate's house, there was never supposed to be any murders. At least I don't think that was the original plan. I think the original plan was just to rob. Because the reason they go over there is because Tex and Linda Kasabian they they had a drug deal going with Jay Sebring. That's right, Atwa. I always mix it up. It's air. I think it's air, trees, water, animals. Let me look this up to make sure I don't make a fool out of myself. Yeah, air, trees, water, animals, and it also means all the way alive. Yeah, that's like Manson's whole thing. Back to the would he like Trump? No, Donald Trump doesn't seem to have too many policies geared toward taking care of air, trees, water, or animals. But yeah, the myth. So the like a little bit of the story is that Tex Watson and Linda Kasabian, they purchased some amount of drugs. I don't remember if it was like MDA at the time that they were trying to buy, or if they were trying to buy acid. They were buying something. I think I know Jay Sebring sold cocaine. I know Frykowski sold, I think, kind of just anything. I know there's a little bit of stuff about how Frykowski at the time, MDA, which is kind of like a beginning of MDMA, which is like ecstasy. I guess that was new on the market at the time. Frykowski was planning to take over. He was planning to kind of monopolize that. He was going to get a big supply and start selling in the Hollywood and LA area and be like the guy. Yeah, Jay Sebring. and Frykowski, they or one of them, they got this deal going. From what I understand, it was a deal where you give them the money and then they bring the stuff to you later. As someone who's done drugs myself, don't ever do those. Don't give your guy money and then expect to come back at the right time and get your stuff because it's not going to be that easy. Yeah, so Tex and Linda Kasabian, they give him the money, and then I think Sebring and Frykowski flaked out on them. They either just didn't call them or they didn't show up. Something happened, the deal went bad. So originally, Tex Watson and Linda Kasabian, they were just going over there to kind of either, steal their money back or steal drugs from them. They were probably planning on roughing him up a little bit. I feel like I also read that they didn't think Sharon Tate wasn't supposed to be home that night. She was supposed to be out of town. I think she was supposed to be out of the country. So they thought they were going over there just to find Jay Sebring and Wojtek Frykowski. And then when they get there, Sharon Tate and Abigail Folger are also there. Stephen Parent, who gets forgotten about a lot, is also in the driveway. And Tex being all methed up, shit kinda gets out of hand. I think Jay Sebring was trying to be a little protective of Sharon Tate. I'm sure some physical stuff broke out, and Tex, I don't know who he killed first. I don't know if I've read if there's an order of who he killed, like, in what order, but, yeah, I think it just gets out of hand, and then once you kill one of them, there's fucking 3 other people you gotta kill, or 4 other people you gotta kill the rest of them. So, yeah, all it was just bad drug dealing. That's crazy because the second night is actually way more interesting. The Sharon Tate house, that gets all the headlines and the publicity, but the second night is, I think, shrouded in way more mystery. Manson actually goes along with them. If you listen to Manson, he talked about how he went into the LaBianca household to take a little black book from Lino LaBianca that apparently had some kind of mob connections. People never really talk about Manson's mob connections. He lived like half his life in prison. He connects with all these old time gangsters. He talks about hanging out with Frankie Carbo and talks about Alvin Karpis, Alvin Creepy Karpis, I think is his name. And he said he was just doing a favor for a mob buddy. So he ties up the LaBiancas, according to him, takes the black book. I think they left the house, though. They went somewhere because Rosemary LaBianca, I think she had an overcoat on. No one ever really talks about that either. She had an overcoat on, which would imply that they left the house in the middle of the night in the cold, and then when they got back, Manson leaves. From what I understand, Manson leaves. I think he also took money from them. I don't know. I know he talks about how that night he was no, I'm switching him up now. I think it was the Sharon Tate night that he was out in, like, San Diego giving money to the stray Satans or something. I haven't brushed up on this shit in so long. It's all just drug dealing. That's, like, the short story of it. But then, yeah, I don't really know why Tex goes into the house with the girls to kill the LaBiancas, but then I've also read that, Lino and Rosemary LaBianca's daughter was, like, associated with Tex Watson, like, they were friends or acquaintances in the drug world. So their own daughter might have known something that was going on. The whole thing is crazy. The whole second night is, like, the craziest night, and there's, like, not a lot of answers for it at all. And most of these people are dead or are about to die. Like, there's not gonna be many more answers coming out anytime in the future. I think kinda what we got now is probably gonna be what we get. I do believe one of my favorite little, like, things about the story is that, Manson and the girls used to drive around in a van, and at one point, they stole a bunch of camera equipment from, like, a local news station, and apparently they had a porn business. I read about this in the file, in the Manson file for sure, I remember this. They would, like, shoot porn videos. That was, like, a big deal back in the '60s. I'm pretty sure porn was illegal back then, or, at the very least, like, highly discouraged. And, yeah, they did a lot of, like, underground home video porn type stuff for people. And then they also would just do general, like, videography for people. You needed to make a video for something or whatever, they'd show up and they'd shoot whatever you need shot. But what that would mean is that you have Manson and a bunch of teenagers and young adults rolling around with a bunch of camera equipment. So I would argue that they probably took a lot of pictures and videos of themselves. And it'd be super interesting to see all those videos and pictures they took of themselves just like hanging out at Spawn Ranch or like, Manson playing music around a campfire or some shit. But I think the kind of idea or the theory is that all that footage was taken away and either destroyed or locked away because when they decided they were gonna go with the whole Helter Skelter story and Manson was gonna be a scary cult leader who was like the devil, it wouldn't really help that story if there was all this footage of, like, Manson and these girls hanging out and, like, playing music and just being happy and, like, being young adults that are smoking weed in the desert and shit. So they had to destroy all that footage. I would also imagine there was a lot of cool music that was on, some of those videos that got destroyed, which is a huge bummer. That's why dude, my favorite recording I actually have, I got that record, I think I posted it, but I got that record, dude, it's the record that he recorded at Gold Star Studio. It's like the best quality recordings of Manson's music you'll ever get. 1967, September 11th, coincidentally, he records an album. Well, not even an album. He just goes in for a recording session to Gold Star Studio. And yeah, it's like the only good quality stuff you'll hear from him. But they're not even like actual recorded, they're just like him literally fucking around on a guitar and singing. And there's a lot of talking, he talks in between the songs and it's really interesting. Yeah, it sucks. Most of the music we have from him is like shitty quality, on a tape deck in prison. A lot of the stuff we have from him is terrible quality. Crazy the man's just a chill dude. Yeah, like the Instagram meme, he's just a chill dude. Yeah, he's definitely. I wouldn't say he's a chill. I mean, he's a chill dude, but I wouldn't say he's a completely chill dude. Sucks they probably destroyed the tapes because him looking chill would go against the theory. Yeah, yeah, that's what I think. They definitely destroyed all that shit because it wouldn't go with the story. Realistically, Manson got caught up in the shit because he was kind of like too good of a friend. And the recordings at the end, Invisible Tears. Yeah, yeah. When you listen to this dude, there's a lot of shit. I might pull up some of this. Like when he's talking and laughing, he's just like, "Oh yeah, this is a song I got from a buddy in prison." He kind of gets caught up in this stuff because he really wasn't like the smartest dude. He makes a lot of bad choices, but like for example, when we got fire news. The fire near was caused by an arsonist. They caught the guy, some Indian man. Yeah, dude, a lot of those fires, there's been a lot of stories, like reports of like homeless people starting fires and shit. And then that shit spreads. This guy being an Indian man, I don't know. I can make some racist jokes and get myself kicked off of YouTube right now. No, but that is crazy. Yeah, at least they caught the guy. But yeah, I've heard that a lot of these fires have been started by arsonists. That shit's crazy. What was I saying? The thing about Manson being like too good of a friend. Yeah, so when Bobby Beausoleil was over at Gary Hinman's house and he couldn't get the money, Bobby Beausoleil calls Charlie Manson and says, "Hey, he won't give me the money. What should I do?" I think most people would just say, "I don't know. It's not my problem." But what does Manson do? He grabs a fucking knife and he shows up and he starts whooping ass for his buddy Bobby Beausoleil. Tex Watson. The whole story starts when Tex Watson rips off Bernard Crow, who was a very big, intimidating black guy who ran around in the underworld and, a guy they didn't want to fuck with. Tex Watson rips him off in a drug deal. And then Tex Watson runs away and hides and he doesn't want to deal with it. He's scared. So what does Manson do? Well, he gets up and he goes and handles it. He ends up going over to Bernard Crow's house to try to calm down the situation. Shit escalates. Manson shoots him. Um, all right, fuck it. I'll try to bust out the whole story like in like the best summary possible. Damn, I was hoping it wasn't an arsonist, but of course it was. Yeah, of course it was. Of course it was a fucking dude. It's January. I don't think fires are just like naturally starting in January. I mean, I know California is hot all the time, and there's a lot of forest with messy grounds and whatnot. But Indian American or 7-Eleven Indian. Oh, dear God. Yeah, of course, dude, it's January. Dude, like I said, we're not even in natural fire season. Like, wait till July. LA is gonna burn down again. That's what's gonna suck. These fires are gonna go on until like March, and then come June and July, it's gonna burn down again. That's what's crazy. We're not even in summertime yet, dude. We're not even in the time of the year when LA usually burns down. Okay. The entire story, like in the best like summarized version possible. Um, Keep updating me with the fire stuff though. We'll do some interruptions for the fire stuff. Okay, so Tex Watson, he's a drug dealer. His like favorite thing to do is to rob other drug dealers. That's like his big deal. He'd go rob a drug dealer of a stash and then he'd sell it or do it or whatever. So at one point, Tex Watson gets into a facts in January. They were trying to say it was climate change. Oh, that's the funny thing. Yeah, they're gonna blame it on climate change, which is, don't get me wrong. I'm all for taking care of the environment. I think within reason. I think we should do our best to take care of of course, the Earth is our home. I don't think we should just banish all electricity and gasoline tomorrow. I think we should progress and get to a better spot where we are taking care of the environment, but where we can still be comfortable while making that progress. And no, of course, they're gonna blame it all on climate change. And it's like, you know, I don't wanna give Donald Trump his credit, but he really was talking about how California needs to clean up the grounds and the forest. They've got all these downed, dead brush and trees, and they made fun of him for saying that, and it's like, what do you mean?" "Well, yeah, of course. Like, isn't that obvious? We should, like, be cleaning up our forests. Like, if a tree falls, somebody should pick it up. Don't you think that just makes sense?" Sure, that shit don't help, but no way, 5 yeah, 5 fires just spawn out of nowhere in the first 10 days of January. Okay, I keep getting sidetracked. No, I'm not getting sidetracked. I told you guys, keep sidetracking me. I wanna hear the fire updates. So yeah, so Tex Watson, he plans this drug deal with Bernard Crow. Bernard Crow is you know what? Let me pull up some pictures of these motherfuckers. Let me see if I can anyways. I don't think this website has pictures of Bernard Crow. Let's move over to the next one. Oh yeah, here we go. This is fucking Bernard Crow. This is the guy that Tex Watson rips off. You can't really see his size in these pictures. Maybe if I put in his name. His nickname was Lotta Papa because he was so big, like a guy whose name was Papa, but there's a lot of him. Yeah, real clever. Whatever. You can't really see him that well in these pictures. So Tex Watson rips off Bernard Crow, steals some money from him. And what happens then is Tex Watson goes back to Spawn Ranch where Manson and the girls were living at, which, by the way, Tex Watson didn't even actually really live at Spawn Ranch. He just kind of was in and out of there. The official story that's not true will tell you that he was like Manson's most dedicated follower, his right hand man. That's not true. They argued all the time. Tex wasn't always at the ranch. He went off and did his own things plenty of times. So yeah, so he rips off Bernard Crow. He gets scared of retaliation from Bernard Crow. He runs to Spawn Ranch. He hides out. This is actually one of my favorite Manson stories. Bernard Crow calls the ranch, and one of the girls answers, and he says, "Hey, can you put Charles on the phone?" So keep in mind, Tex Watson's real name is Charles, right? So Bernard Crow is calling and asking for Charles because that's how he knows Tex Watson. But one of the girls hears this, and they think he's talking about Charles Manson. So the girl gets the phone. She puts Manson on the phone, and Bernard Crow just immediately starts going off about, you fucking stole money from me. I'm gonna come to your place and I'm gonna burn it down. I think I think it was in the Final Words documentary, the 27 documentary that Rob Zombie narrates. George Stimson, he quotes Bernard Crow as saying that Bernard Crow said he was gonna come down to Spawn Ranch and kill all the men and rape all the women, just talking crazy shit. So the funniest part to me is that in most cases, like if I answered the phone and a guy just starts going off about how I robbed him and he's gonna come to my house and burn it down and kill me, the first thing I would say is like, "Bro, you got the wrong number. I don't know what you're talking about." But apparently Manson says, "No, we're not fucking playing like that. I'll come down and talk to you right now." But I think what really fully happened was that, Manson put it together that this he was looking for Tex. So apparently Manson goes and finds Tex and says, "Hey, you need to deal with this. This is you ripped this guy off. This is your problem." And Tex said, "No, I'm not going to go deal with it." Tex was scared of the guy, so Manson going and dealing with his friend's problems for him. I don't remember who he takes with him. I don't know if it was Clem or if it was someone else on the ranch. I don't know if Casper's still in the chat. I wish he was because I'd be curious if he knows that. But yeah, Manson takes some other guy with him. He brings a gun with him just in case he goes to Bernard Crow's house. They have words. Manson's trying to calm the whole situation down, but things end up escalating, and Manson ends up shooting Bernard Crow. Manson leaves him on the floor, leaves the house or apartment, I think it was, gets in the car and goes. So Manson thinks he killed Bernard Crow, but Bernard Crow didn't die. He survives. But just keep in mind that Manson thinks he killed him. Sometime in the near future, at the Spawn Ranch, they're watching the news, and there's a news report about how a Black Panther was just murdered recently. TJ the Terrible, that's what it was. TJ the Terrible goes with him. Casper, since you're still here again, if I make any mistakes, please feel free to. Like I said, it's been a while, and I'm bad. I'm terrible at summaries. I'm very good at intaking information, but then when I try to spit it back out, I lose control. So yeah, so after he shoots Bernard Crow, they're hanging around the Spawn Ranch, they're watching the news, and there's a report about how a Black Panther was just recently shot and killed. And like I said earlier, the Black Panthers was a big civil rights crew going around at the time, taking care of business and shit. So Manson sees this and he thinks that it's Bernard Crow. He thinks he killed Bernard Crow and he thinks Bernard Crow is the Black Panther that the news is talking about. So then Manson says, "Holy shit, the Black Panthers are going to come here and they're going to handle business." Manson realizes that the ranch is mostly girls. It's mostly girls living on the ranch. So he says, "We need some more manpower around here. The place needs to be protected." So Manson goes and hits up the Straight Satans. I've talked about before how Manson was really not a hippie. He was more so a biker. I've heard that like his friends would, if you were to ask his friends to describe him, they would tell you that he was a biker, certainly not a hippie like like the news likes to tell you. So he gets the Straight Satans, a bunch of bikers, to come down and start living on the ranch. He basically pays them with, I'm sure there's drugs he's paying them with. He also says you can fuck the girls. The girls are all down for free love and shit. So yeah, a bunch of bikers come to live on the ranch to offer some more protection just in case the Black Panthers show up. So while everybody's on the ranch and they're mingling, this is when Bobby Beausoleil decides he wants to start slinging drugs, I guess. So he sells some of the Black Panther, or not the Black Panthers. He sells he makes a deal with some of the Straight Satan's bikers. He's going to sell them a supply of mescaline. So that's when Bobby Beausoleil goes to his buddy Gary Hinman, because I think Gary Hinman was like an art teacher, but on the side he also made drugs and sold drugs. Real hippie type shit. So yeah, he gets a stash of mescaline from Gary Hinman. He comes back to the ranch. He sells it to the Black Panthers. Well, I keep saying the Black Panthers. He sells it to the Straight Satans. The Straight Satans come back to him. They tell him this stuff's not good. I think they said some of their girls had a bad trip doing that stuff, but regardless, they say the mescaline is no good, and they want their money back. I think it was like $2,000. Might have been like $3,000. I don't know. It's a couple thousand, I think. So, yeah, so Bobby Beausoleil goes back to Gary Hinman's and says, "Hey, they didn't like the mescaline. They want their money back. So I need you to give me the money back." And Gary Hinman says, "I don't have the money. I already spent it." By the way, there's two girls. I think it's Mary Brunner and one other girl that I also can't remember. Maybe Casper would know this too. The two girls that went with Gary Hinman, or no, that went with Bobby Beausoleil over to Gary Hinman's house. One of them was Mary Brunner, I'm pretty sure. And so they're at Gary Hinman's house, and they basically stay there for, at this point, I don't know if they stayed for a few hours or a couple days, but they stay there. And, Bobby Beausoleil just starts arguing with him, you know, being like, "Dude, seriously, you got to give me the money back. This isn't good, blah, blah, blah." Finally, after some time, I think it was Mary Brunner, you know, she realizes she sees the situation's going nowhere, so she gets on the phone. She calls Susan Atkins. Okay. Oh man, I'm glad that you're here because you definitely have more of this shit down than I do right now. So Mary Brunner gets on the phone, and this is one of the reasons that I think that the mainstream kind of portrays Manson as the cult leader because he's 34 or 35 at this point. He's the oldest guy, and all these kids you got to think are like anywhere from like fucking I think like 14 or 15 up to like 20. I've heard George Stimson, who's a personal friend of Manson's. I know he's married to Sandra, or he was. I think he was married to Sandra Good, or is. He's with Sandra Good. They're the That's, like, the most that he's, closely associated with that I know about. So he knows a lot of this stuff personally, and he says, "No, Manson wasn't a cult leader, but what he was he was, like, the older friend." You know, he explains it like, when you're in high school, you know, your group of friends has the one older kid, and he's the cool kid that everybody goes to for advice, you know? I talked about my buddy Austin from high school who got me my first girlfriend and taught me how to do my hair, you know, things like that. So, so Mary Bunner calls up Manson, you know? Being like, "Hey, this is going nowhere. Gary Hinman's not giving Beausoleil the money. Um, you should come down here and help out." Manson being, you know, ex-con, prison life, I think he handles things differently than a lot of people would. So he comes on down to Gary Hinman's house, and he has, I've heard it described as a really long knife, and I've heard it described as a sword. He comes down, he tells Gary Hinman, "Hey, just give Beausoleil the money." Gary Hinman continues to not give him the money, and then that's when Manson slashes up his face. So Manson cuts up his face. Apparently, it damn near cuts off his ear. And then Manson tells Beausoleil, "Handle your shit like a man. Quit calling me. Get your shit figured out." And he leaves. So now that Manson has showed up and cut Gary Hinman's ear damn near off, Beausoleil thinks, you know, damn, this guy's gonna call the cops. I need to stay here and make sure he doesn't call the cops. So they all stay there. At this point, they've been there. They stay there for like days, apparently. There's one little funny, not funny, but terrible part of the story where Beausoleil was like beating up Gary Hinman again, and I think Susan Atkins tried to sew his ear back on with dental floss. Some kind of crazy shit like that. So, anyways, after a few days of getting roughed up, you know, getting all fucked up, finally Gary Hinman's like, "Dude, fuck this. I'm calling the cops. Like, I can't do this. My ear is bleeding out. You know, this shit is terrible. I'm gonna call the cops." So Beausoleil says, "Well, the only thing I could think to do to make sure that he wouldn't call the cops is to fucking kill him." So Bobby Beausoleil stabs him to death. And then that's when he gets his blood and he starts writing stuff on the walls, you know, the Black Panthers paw prints and political piggy. Thank you to Casper for making sure that I remembered that tonight. Because in his mind, he's thinking, well, I can make this look like a Black Panther murder so that the police don't come after me. And then I think like a week or so later, um, the cops pull over Bobby Beausoleil. He was driving around in Gary Hinman's car with the bloody knife in the trunk of the car. Like clearly not an experienced criminal. You know, this is like Luigi Mangione type shit. This guy's driving around with the murder weapon in the murder victim's car. And so Bobby Beausoleil goes to prison. So that is the kind of the chain of events that starts everything off. So now everyone on the ranch is panicked. You know, what if Bobby Beausoleil tells on us? I think Mary Brenner and Susan Atkins were the most panicked because they were there. Manson, of course, is also panicked because he cut the guy's face up. You know, Manson's already been to prison for more than half his life at this point, so he's always you know, concerned with being caught up in shit like this. So some people believe that the murders at Sharon Tate's house and the LaBianca's house was the one of the girls had mentioned, "Hey, you know, it would be a good idea. We could try to commit copycat crimes where you go out and we murder some other people and we make the crime scene look the same. That way the police will go, "Oh, the murderer is still out here. We obviously have the wrong guy." And then they would let Bobby Beausoleil go. I tend to think that everybody involved had different motivations. So they call that motive the for love or like the love of brother theory. You know what? Let me pull up. There's another website called just charlesmanson.com, and that's got all the theories listed out pretty well. Yeah, here we go. Let's pull this up. I might end up repeating myself a little bit while I'm reading this, but this is yeah, the copycat murder, the love of brother motive. Um, August 6, 1969, Bobby Busseley, a heavily involved member of the Manson family. I always put that up because they weren't called the Manson family. Was sleeping in the backseat of a Volkswagen on the side of Highway 101 near San Luis Obispo when a California Highway Patrol squad car approached the vehicle. The officer observed Beausoleil, who was then woken up and explained that the car I'm already misreading things. The car had broken down the evening prior. When the officer ran the vehicle's registration, he discovered that it was stolen and wanted by Los Angeles police for fingerprinting as it reportedly belonged to Gary Hinman. Now let's get to the actual motive part. Inside the Hinman home, police found the body of Gary Hinman, and on the wall, printed in his blood, were the words "political piggy" and a bloody paw print. Apparently, Beausoleil believed this would tie the crime to the Black Panther movement, an African American revolutionary group who were active at the time. When word got back to the ranch that Beausoleil was apprehended, it is believed that a few of the Manson girls came up with the idea to commit copycat murders that would lead the police to believe the Hinman murder was committed by someone else, specifically the Black Panthers. This theory has been corroborated by most of the Manson family members over the years. For example, Susan Atkins stated, "Instantly, the atmosphere it spawns." Man, I can't fucking read when I'm on this live shit. Casper gonna take the dog out, pee back. Right on, man. No, shout out San Luis Obispo. Yeah. Susan Atkins says the atmosphere at Spawn Ranch tightened even more. We figured it would only be hours before the police came down on us, but additionally, we were all affected by Charlie's obsession with getting Bobby out of jail. I always will say, keep in mind, this is coming from Susan Atkins. I don't think she's the most reliable source on anything. Bobby had been driven by a need to prove himself as tough as Charlie, and now Charlie was possessed with the need to prove his loyalty to his brother, to die for him if necessary. Out of all of the confusion and the mass of words and constant use of drugs came a vague sort of scheme to try to convince the police that Bobby could not have done the Hinman killing. I think there is a quote from one or more of them that Manson basically told them at one point. Some of the girls bring up trying to get a lawyer, and they're like, "No, we can't afford a lawyer. That's not going to work." And Manson says something to the girls along the lines of, "Get my brother out of jail." And they just say, "Well, how do we do that?" And he says, "I don't know, just get it done." So that's usually that's a quote that gets kind of misconstrued as, they'll say, "Oh, you see, this is clearly Manson telling the girls to go kill people." And it's like, no, he just said, "Get my fucking brother out of jail." He said, "I'm not getting involved, but get him out of jail. Figure some shit out." So that's one of the theories for the murders. The theory that I tend to go with is the drug burn theory, which is, like I said, uh, it's all drug dealing. So yeah, so that Bobby Beausoleil, Gary Hinman murder happens, and then so I think that was some of the motive for some people. Like, I think maybe Susan Atkins, that could be her motive. I definitely think it was Leslie Van Houten's motive because she was the closest to Bobby Beausoleil at the time. So she wanted him out of prison because she was like with him. I think they were together. And so that would make sense that that was her motive. She wanted to get her boyfriend out of prison. But I don't think it was Tex Watson's motive, and I don't think it was Linda Kasabian's motive. Their motive, in my opinion, was the drug dealing. This one's a little long. Let's do this one. I'll just read charlesmanson.com, the drug burn theory. This is mostly the one that I'm into. Police originally suspected drugs from the very beginning of their investigation. However, the drug burn theory originated from various different sources, some of which still circulate today and suggest that Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski, among some, if not all, of their guests in the house, were heavily into drugs, the occult, wild sex orgies, and satanic parties, especially when it comes to victim Wojtek Frykowski, who had reportedly been preparing to become the exclusive LA area distributor of the new amphetamine called MDA with the financial backing of his wealthy girlfriend, Abigail Folger. Yeah, I mentioned all that earlier. So, yeah, Manson says, "Get my dog out of jail." Yeah, Manson was crazy. Not in the way that people say, but, like, fucking ex-con. Most of the rules he lived by were the rules that he learned in prison, which obviously doesn't work in the outside world, so that's a lot what gets him into trouble most of the time. But yeah, so that's another thing that gets left out when everyone talks about the Helter Skelter story is that apparently the police, from the very beginning, the police thought this was all drug dealing. Like this has been known since 1969 when this shit happened. But then once they decided they were going to do the Helter Skelter cult leader thing, they stopped talking about drugs and drug dealing because it doesn't, the Helter Skelter story doesn't work when you get into, oh, they were all drug dealers and they were all doing drugs and, it is important to note that MDA was found in the systems of both Abigail Folger and Wojtek Frykowski at the time of their autopsies. For instance, according to Los Angeles County coroner, toxicological examinations of the victims showed Coffee Harris, Abigail Folger, 26 years old, had 2.4 milligrams of the drug MDA in her bloodstream. Her friend, a 37-year-old Polish playboy, dude, I hope when I'm 37, I'm hooking up with 26-year-olds. 100%. Wojtek Frykowski has zero point 0.6 milligrams. Oh, so he's a wuss. He was letting his girlfriend do more than him. Fucking wuss. According to various reports, on Tuesday, August 5th, 1969, just 4 days before the murders, 22 people joined Folger and Frykowski for some sort of satanic gathering where it was said a man was seized, stripped, and tied knee to a post. This stuff I don't buy into the when they get into like Sharon Tate being into Satanism, and this is the stuff I don't buy into. Folger and Frykowski explained that he was being punished for a $2,000 dope burn. That I believe. Allegedly giving poor quality drugs to Jay Sebring, another victim. The man was whipped and humiliated throughout an orgy of sex and drugs. Allegations to this effect were first aired by actor Dennis Hopper in an interview with an underground Los Angeles newspaper who stated, they had fallen into sadism and masochism and bestiality. That stuff I do believe. I don't believe the Satanism, but they were definitely into weird sex stuff. And they recorded it all on videotape too. Yeah, there's some reports of the cops finding some weird tapes in Sharon Tate's house. But that, of course, never gets talked about in the Helter Skelter theory either. The only way that the Helter Skelter theory works is if all the victims are like very innocent angels, which is not the case. A lot of Sharon Tate fans will get very offended when you start mentioning this stuff. And it's like, dude, you can still be a fan of hers and acknowledge that she was into some pretty crazy shit. I mean, this was Hollywood in the late 60s. I think they were all into weird shit. Yeah, see, this stuff I don't know. Although initially denied by police, it was later confirmed that remnants of that night's satanic orgy, black hoods, leather aprons, occult items, drug paraphernalia, and sadomasochistic devices were in fact found in the loft above Sharon Tate's living room. Yeah, for sure, but just not satanic. They were just doing weird sex stuff. According to an interview article with Ed Sanders, Ed Sanders is kind of iffy. Yeah, yeah, I've read some stuff about there being some like bestiality stuff going on with Sharon Tate and some of the others. You know what? This doesn't really explain that much of the drug burn theory. It really didn't get into any of what I was talking about when I talk about the drug burn theory. Yeah, that was kind of a bummer. That's not what I think of it at all. How can you believe the helter skelter shit at all if all the drug deals and shit is undeniably true? Well, the people, people that believe in the helter skelter stuff, they don't think there was drugs. They think Sharon Tate was a sweet, innocent little girl. They think Wojtek Frykowski was just a friend. They think Jay Sebring was just her friend. Um, yeah, they were all doing drugs and selling drugs, and they were, this is. I mean, this stuff still goes on in Hollywood. It's just now they talk about it openly. Every celebrity talks about going to rehab, and um, but back then you didn't talk about that stuff. That would ruin a career. If they found out you were doing drugs or, porn wasn't talked about either. Nowadays, people are famous for making porn, but back then that was not. Apparently, there's a big like porn angle to the story too. Some people have done some research and found that a lot of like illegal porn was being made. Yeah, yeah. Anyone that really buys into Helter Skelter, they think that yeah, Sharon Tate was just like a sweet innocent girl. The thing is, all the victims knew the killers. Like they all knew who Tex was. Um, Yeah, but that's kinda like with everything, like, look at the JFK assassination. Generally, the public thinks that he was killed by some guy. I think nowadays, though, I think it's kinda becoming more popular that most people know that there's something fishy about the JFK assassination. I think there's a lot of cases where the public knows one theory and it's not actually what actually happened. One thing that's funny about the JFK assassination, Vincent Bugliosi, the guy who wrote the book Helter Skelter, he also wrote a book on the JFK assassination, and apparently it's been, like, panned as, like, the worst, like, it's a total joke, no one takes it seriously, it's a really shitty book. Yeah, Vincent Bugliosi was just, the attorney, a lawyer, he got lucky. Charles Manson walked into the courtroom, and he made up this whole story about Helter Skelter, and Manson didn't even like the Beatles, that's, like, one of the funniest things, Charles Manson didn't like the Beatles. He said it before in interviews. He said, "No, the Beatles, dude, Manson was 35. Manson liked, like, old country music. He liked Hank Williams and, like, Bing Crosby. He didn't like the Beatles. He didn't listen to the Beatles. The girls liked the Beatles, they were young." Yeah, no, that whole theory it's a wild theory, and it's crazy, like, when you think about that story, there's a lot of crazy stuff that you have to believe that story. Like Manson being a hippie cult leader with brainwashing abilities. Like, why didn't he brainwash people in prison? Like, why did he never, if he could convince people to kill for him, why did he never convince, like, a prison guard to let him out? Why did Dude, there's a story that, Vincent Bugliosi tried to tell about he tried to say that when he was in court, Manson looked at his watch on his wrist, and the watch stopped. Like, literally saying that Manson has these magical powers where he can stop somebody's watch by looking at it. Like, absolute insanity that people believe this stuff. Yeah, Goodbye Helter Skelter. I actually have never read it and I don't have it, but I've always wanted to. George Stimson is one of my favorites. One of my favorite sources on the story. I know him and Nicholas Schreck. I think they're friends. They're friendly. I think they've said they have a very friendly disagreement. I don't know. I don't know what parts they disagree on completely. I've Doesn't George Stimson kind of lean more toward the love of brother theory? Or does he I've never really heard him say specifically one theory, but I know in, the Final Words documentary, I got the impression that he kinda leans toward they were trying to get Bobby Beausoleil out of prison. That was, like, the main motivation, whereas Nicholas Schreck seems to go more toward it was all just drug dealing. I think it was kind of a little bit of a combo of both, like, I think I mentioned this when you were out with the when you took the dog out. I definitely think, Leslie Van Houten was very close to Bobby Beausoleil. I could see her motive being, the copycat crimes to get Beausoleil out of prison. I could also see Susan Atkins, now that I learned that, she was there with Beausoleil when he commits the murder. Susan Atkins has a a vested interest in getting Bosley out of prison too, because she's worried that he's gonna snitch. So those 2 characters, yes, I believe their motive was copycat murders to get Bosley out of prison, but when it comes to, like, Watson and Kasabian, who I believe are the 2 main perpetrators, the fact that Linda Kasabian was set free, the fact that she was the star, that's insanity. She should have spent life in prison. She should have spent the rest of her life in prison, and then she goes on to live a terrible life in Seattle and continues abusing drugs and being a fucking petty criminal. I saw JFK and his brother both got offed because they wanted to make AIPAC the Israel Interest Group a foreign group, not an American one that can pay off politicians, and they got offed for or they got off for it. Yeah, I know JFK has talked about, JFK used to talk about abolishing the, fuck, what is it? What's the place God, I'm gonna sound so stupid right now, the place that makes money, the Federal Reserve. I think JFK talked about getting rid of the Federal Reserve, which, yeah, of course he got taken out. Of course, of course the powers that be took him out. Yeah, so this is, like, one of my favorite things to say. Manson is more of a gangster. Manson was not a hippie. He was a biker and he was a gangster. Um, like I said, no one ever talks about all of his prison connections. He was basically raised in prison, so he's being raised by these old-timey gangsters. Part of the reason Manson spent his life in prison is because he wouldn't snitch. He wouldn't come out and just say, Yeah, Tex killed these people because he was drug dealing and they wanted to get Bobby Mosley." Manson would never snitch on anybody. That's like his number one rule. I think it was more towards the copycat killings. Yeah. Yeah, no, I like the copycat theory. Like I said, I tend to go toward a little bit of both, a little combination of both. Tex and Kasabian are doing drugs. Leslie Van Houten wants to copycat murder, and Susan Atkins wants to copycat murder. So, I think, I always argue that there's more than one motivation. There's a lot more people than just one person involved in the story. So, yeah, of course, there's more than one motive. JFK wanted the CIA to go away too. Casper, we brought up JFK only because when you were gone, I was talking about, Vincent Bugliosi wrote that book about the JFK assassination, and it was seen as a total joke. Rightfully so. Vincent Bugliosi's kind of a douchebag. Yeah, JFK was the man. Yeah, I thought JFK was awesome. I started reading a book. I only read it the first few pages. I was only reading it at work one day when the power went out, and we were hanging out in the break room. There's a book, I think it's called Doctor Feelgood. It's about the doctor that used to shoot up celebrities and politicians with basically methamphetamine to keep them running, and he was JFK's doctor. And a big reason that JFK, like, got through, JFK had a lot of health problems and, was, like, chronically exhausted, and, yeah, Doctor Feelgood used to fix him up. Yeah, JFK, I thought he was the man. I think he's the last guy that really wanted to do, he talked about how secret societies are not good and, I think he wanted to do actually some good stuff. I know some people that I don't wanna say look up to, but some people that I'm into, they like Jimmy Carter. I've never really looked into Jimmy Carter too much. I know he just passed, but, and then, of course, you hear, Ronald Reagan. You either hear people love him or they hate him. It's always one or the other. I've never really looked into him too much. I like him as a character, I like characters, right? So, all politics aside, Ronald Reagan, just being like a good-looking dude who talks cool, I'll take that. But yeah, I don't really know much about what he did. But yeah, the last guy I really think actually was a good dude was, I would say JFK. It's funny, a lot of these guys have, like, connections in the Manson story too. Like, Ronald Reagan was the governor of California at the time, and everyone knows that he hated hippies, so he's got a vested interest in, like, maybe one of maybe Ronald Reagan and Richard Nixon's motives for getting these guys put in prison. People talk about how they wanted to end the hippie era or whatever, so that's part of the reason they try to tell everybody that Manson was a hippie. So now people think of hippies as Charles Manson, but it's No, Manson wasn't a hippie. Manson was too old, dude. Like, that's the funniest thing. Like, the hippie motto was "Don't trust anybody over 30," and Manson's 35. Like, the guy's not even allowed to be a hippie. Now, let's see. I was gonna pull up one of these things from the Gold Star recordings. 'Cause how many figures are involved in it's, like, overwhelming, honestly, when you look at, like, how many people are actually involved. Everyone only talks about the 3 girls in Manson and Tex, but, like, when I read the Manson file the first time, I have to read it again because it's been over a year since I've read it, and really the first time I read it, there's just, like, so much characters and information. It's, like, overwhelming. Like, I would have to read each page, like, 2 or 3 times, and then sometimes I'd finish my reading for the day, and I'd put it away, and then the next day I'd come back to it, and I'm already lost 'cause there's just so much to it. Alright, here's a good example. I think earlier, so you mentioned that, yeah, Manson just sounds like a normal guy when you hear him talk. Like, he's not some crazy fucking cult leader who can stop watches with his eyes. Dude, like, he just talks like a normal dude.
Okay. Let's see. Do whatever you feel like, man. Now, just groove, you know. Tell us when you're gonna start and we'll turn the machine on. Okay. Yeah. Well, can't you just turn it on and let it go? Okay, we're gonna let it go right now. And then take out what you want and the rest throw it away. You should get a job making people nervous. What was we at? Restless people from the sick city burnt their homes down. Oh, you wanted something happy. Let's see, I'm trying to think of something happy, man. No, don't even think, man. I take back everything I said. All right. I'm just sitting here gonna groove with you for the next hour and a half. All right. 45 minutes. All right. Do what you want to do. All right. Right here. Let's see. What was we talking about? Sick City. Yeah. Another one. Another. Well, I woke up a fraction late. Send you up the ring. And then he wrote this one about his girlfriend while he was in jail. The one that turned him in, I guess. When day is due and I lose and bought my well, I was sprung from jail. Dick pretty daddy. Home.
Yeah, just sounds like a normal dude. He sounds goofy. Like, he's, like, laughing half the time. And then you listen to any of the people talk about him, they tell you he's, like, this crazy he doesn't do himself any favors, like, for the TV interviews. A lot of his friends have talked about, like, when he does the TV interviews that everybody knows about, like, in the '80s and '90s, he, like, puts on this character, tries to kinda act like he's a bad guy. So, yeah, no, he doesn't do himself any favors. That's part of how he got really fucked over was that he just, he didn't even know how to act like an innocent dude. But, yeah, he talks a lot about it then you start getting into, like, his philosophy and stuff, and, that's a whole other episode, but he talks a lot about how, he's just a reflection of what people think, so whatever you think of him as is, like, the person that he's gonna behave like in front of you. So, like, when, Geraldo Rivera interviews him on TV and he, acts like a crazy person, it's like, dude, you realize, like, this isn't helping you, and I think Nicholas Schreck has mentioned that he's talked to him about that before. It's like, dude, like, you realize you're not doing yourself any favors, like, wanna get paroled, you know, maybe you wanna get out of prison someday, but every time you do an interview, you come out here and you act like a fucking crazy dude. It's not helping your image. Oh, what else did I title this as? I feel like there was another topic I was gonna get to at some point, but I don't think so. I think I only had California fires, Bobby Beausoleil. I was gonna talk about TikTok getting shut down, I guess. I don't know. I don't think there's anyone left in chat, but if there is, does anyone have an opinion on that? I don't think it's gonna I'll believe it's one of those things that I'll believe when I see it. I've heard 3 things. I've heard that one of the Kardashians is gonna try to buy it. I've heard that Disney is gonna try to buy it, and I've heard that Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank is gonna try to buy it. But, I don't know. I don't think Charlie wanted to get out of jail. You know what? I tend to agree with that too. I think, I've heard people say that he wanted to, but he didn't want to. Like, he would act like he wanted to, or, maybe someday he'd wake up in a mood where he's tired of it. And, no, realistically, once you spent your whole life in prison, yeah, no, I could easily see him not wanting to get out. That was pretty much his life by that point. I had, I'll try to do both these topics now for at the same time since I brought them both up. Casper, funny thing is, back in like my mid 20s, I used to work at a gas station, and there was this older gentleman who would come in. His name was Bob, and he would come in all the time. We ended up becoming friends, and he would come in when I was on my shifts, and we'd work. And he was a nice guy. I think he was like 70 at the time, and he was a prison guard in Vacaville. When Manson was there. So he never had any interactions with Manson, but he said his coworkers would tell stories about Manson was sometimes just like a moody guy. So some days you might just get like a totally normal person, and then some days he might be kind of a handful. But yeah, he was there when that little story about the Manson like planning to get a hot air balloon and bust out of the prison roof. He was there when that happened. It was like one of his buddies that caught him with, like, the plans or something. I don't remember exactly what it was, but he was there when Manson was there, and he was there when Ed Kemper was there. I don't know if you're a true crime guy or just a Manson, um, like, studier or researcher or whatever you wanna call it, but, yeah, he was also there when Ed and he was friends with Ed Kemper when he was there. He said Ed Kemper was a really nice guy. And then, Protomax, it's moving to a new app. What would it so, like, it wouldn't be called TikTok anymore? I'm curious about I have the TikTok for this, for Disco Acid Cult TV. I barely use it. I've used it a little bit recently, but I wonder, am I just gonna wake up on January 21st or whatever and it's gonna be gone? If it's moving to a new app, I wonder what the new app is. I thought the only catch was that an American company had to buy it. I thought that's all it was. It just can't be owned by China anymore. So if an American company comes along and buys it, would it still be called TikTok if it moved to a new app, or would it be called something different? Like I said, I don't believe it's gonna, I don't think we're gonna wake up and there's no way we lose TikTok. And I wish we did. I hate TikTok. I wish it would go away. So it's not like I'm saying I think it's gonna stay because I like it, but man, I really need to do more Manson stuff. That was originally what I was doing. Um, I still like doing what I generally do. Casper, I think this is your first time. I would imagine you clicked on here because of the title. Usually, I stream on Wednesdays with a buddy of mine. We just do, we talk about whatever's going on in the world, like current events. And, usually we're pretty crass. I make a lot of crass, vulgar jokes. We like to do, kinda comedic stuff. But I've always wanted to do Manson stuff, talk about stuff, but the problem is that there's so many better people that do, I don't know if you've heard of, Paulcast. I like that YouTube channel a lot. I like those guys. I'm in that Facebook group. Um, I think they do, like, crazy good, like, they do, like, actual research and, get into things. Um, and I'm not a very good I mentioned this earlier, I'm a good researcher, like, I can take in information, but I'm very bad at, like, presenting it to people, like, you heard me stumble through that whole summary just a little bit ago. I'm terrible at, like, presenting the information back, and I'm terrible at doing it in my own way too, but I would like to find a way to do some kind of, like, Manson-related stuff. I know one of my first ideas, and this is a super cheap and tacky idea, but it would still be kind of fun. I would like to do like watch alongs, you know, pull up some of the famous interviews with him, watch along with chat on a night when I actually have more people in chat. We could do some commentary, talk about what we think is going on, stuff like that. Yeah, I need to figure out a way to regurgitate information that I take in better. I've wanted to do a video on the whole book of on the Manson file for a long time. I just would need to reread the book and, like, take notes. That was a good analogy you made of Manson. What analogy did I give? I'm already I'm already forgetting things. Briefing of Manson, you gave all the theories. Yeah, no, I would like to do more stuff. It's just hard to all the stuff's been talked about so much. I think there's a good, I don't know if you've ever seen it. My favorite summary of all time, let me pull this up and I'll show you. In my opinion, the best briefing, like, of all time, the best, like, summary. When I say summary, it's a 3 but it takes 3 hours to get this whole summary out. There's this video on YouTube. Again, I have to mention Nicholas Schreck. I would imagine you've at least heard the name since you're into this stuff and you've heard of people like George Stimson. There's an interview with Nicholas Schreck on a channel it's a podcast called Midnight Rider, but it's uploaded onto Nicholas Schreck's YouTube channel. If you just look up Nicholas Schreck, Midnight Rider, and you'll see Midnight Rider is spelled like writer, somebody who writes. It's a really good it's 3 hours, so, whenever you have time. It's like a perfect in my opinion, this is the best. Anybody that ever messages me and says, like, "What's a way to look into this stuff?" This is the video I always recommend people to. Yeah, I mean, there's not much more I could say. It's like the perfect interview. Um, Proto Max, I know we mentioned I think I talked about it the other day when I was saying, they were actually friends. Here's that picture of them. It's funny, the pictures of Manson, old Manson in prison, I don't know why I always think are funny. Like, looking at this guy and trying to think that this is, like, the ultimate boogeyman, like, the scariest man who's ever lived. Like, dude, look at him. He got a big goatee. He looks I won't say he looks clueless and naive, but dude, I don't know. I don't see this guy as, like, uh, the boogeyman or the devil. I don't see him that way. I don't think he was a great dude at all. I think, I haven't seen it. Yeah, whenever you get a chance, you should check it out. If it's a great interview, and it's pretty much the best surface level summary you can get in a 3-hour interview. Yeah, I've always thought Manson, he's not a good guy. Like, certainly the guy's a criminal. Again, Nicholas Schreck, I've heard him say on in an interview, no, he wasn't the devil, he wasn't the boogeyman. He said, I wouldn't trust him with my car keys. I'd never let him borrow my car or trust him around my wallet. But he certainly wasn't the ultimate bad guy that the American news likes to make him out to be. I know you're all good, Proto Max. If you're driving, you don't have to worry about commenting in here. Her TikTok is partnering with a company owned by America instead of selling homes to override the government ruling. Well, yeah, that would override it because that's the whole. They're not saying TikTok needs to go away. They're just saying that it needs to be owned by an American company, which I would agree with. I don't think it's necessarily great that we have China, you know, having all the information they have with how many people here have TikTok. I got to get out of here pretty soon. I'm gonna let there's pretty much just two of you left. I'll wait for a few more. I'll see what Casper. I'm gonna see what your next response is gonna be. Man, I do wish Annie was here for this one. It would have been a good one if Annie was in here because Annie always likes getting into stories like this. That's the other thing. I'd be way better at explaining and talking about the all the Manson stuff if I had, I'm better when there's someone else here to talk to, or like if chat was like, I don't want to say exploding, but if there was a more consistent flow or like people to address, that's when I end up doing better. I'm still pretty bad at talking to myself in my room, but sometimes I get going. I can get going pretty good sometimes. I heard Annie believes in Helter Skelter. I don't know what she actually. I've told her all this stuff. I'm pretty sure she doesn't like. She's not much into the case other than what I've told her. But yeah, I guess I would be curious to see what she thinks. At least aside from what I've told her. But even then, me and her, we haven't had. It's not like we've had any kind of full blown conversations about it. But I at least know that she knows what I think about it. I think Helter Skelter is comical. Yeah, Helter Skelter. Once you actually get into the story and learn the facts, it's basically a joke. It's honestly hilarious. The thing about the Helter Skelter theory is that it only works because it's Charles Manson. Like, imagine being Vincent Bugliosi and like waiting for the guy to come into court, and it's Manson who walks in. Like you scored a jackpot. You know, again, Manson doing himself no favors. With the long hair and the crazy personality, and boisterous and very what am I trying to say? Charismatic in a almost a negative way in the context that he was in. Vincent Bugliosi could have made up any story. I think he could have made up any story and told it to the public, and they would have looked at Manson and they would have gone, yeah, oh yeah, that guy's crazy. You know, that guy's definitely a crazy. Any kind of crazy story Bugliosi came up with, it would have worked. That's Manson did himself no favors acting the way he acts. Yeah, yeah, and it's crazy how people don't pay attention to that, like, how he hires an author to come sit in on the court proceedings with him. Like, what lawyer hires an author to come sit in, you know? He knew that was gonna be his meal ticket as soon as Manson walked in that courtroom, but Bugliosi really is, like, the luckiest dude in the world. I mean, the universe practically handed him his meal ticket when Manson is the guy that walked into the courtroom that day. And the girls, dude, the girls really fucked Manson over doing all their shit, like crawling on their hands and knees to the courthouse and you know, protesting outside. None of them did themselves any favors. And Bugliosi made a killing off of all that. So Manson got too much swag. Yeah, no, way too charismatic in the worst way possible to be fighting those charges. But even the trial gets weird. Like, I've heard that Manson didn't even get to present a defense, like, his team just rested when it was their turn to present the defense. But then I've also heard that Manson also just didn't want to present a defense. I've heard both. I've heard that he got fucked, and I've heard that he kinda fucked himself. So even the trial is strange, you know? I mean, it was essentially a show trial. And then, Richard Nixon gets out on the news talking about how Manson's guilty. That shoulda dude, that shoulda thrown the trial away right there when the president of the United States comes out and says, "This guy's guilty," when the trial is going on. That was huge news. That should have been. And then there's comments. He was heard later saying he knew exactly what he was doing, basically saying that he knew he was influencing the American public to go against Manson. And he very intentionally made those comments during the trial to make that happen. And, there's, like, nothing normal about the story. The whole story is crazy. There's a lot more mystery to it than most people think there is, and a lot of weird stuff, and it gets into politics, and you get into law, and you get into the context of all the shit that's going on. It's all a lot. It's all way too much. I get way too overwhelmed when I sit down and try to talk about it on the fly, and I act like I know all this stuff, and I don't really know that much about it. Man, yeah, this chair is way too squeaky. And I really like this fucking microphone, though. I wish the colors showed up better on camera. Yeah, see if I change them. Doesn't really show up too well. I guess you can see that it's all blue now, but the red looks more like a pink. Yeah, then see, I just changed the red to green, but you can't really tell. Linda Kasabian. Yeah, that's why she wouldn't write the book, though. I think Linda Kasabian is just as guilty as Tex. Like I said, it was her and Tex Watson it was their idea to go over to Jay Sebrings and Wojtek Frykowski and rob them. Yeah, she definitely knows more than anyone. I think she's one of the most guilty people, so I think that's why she doesn't write a book. She's probably the luckiest person in the case. I think she was one of the most guilty, and she got completely, they made her the star witness of the Helter Skelter trial. So she got off completely free. She did no prison time. So yeah, I'm pretty sure as soon as the trial was over, she ran. She took off and she went into hiding because she knows she got fucking lucky. She should have also been doing life in prison right next to Tex Watson. But because she looks like a little girl, and they put her in the pigtails, and they let her come into court talking about how, "Oh, they all took advantage of me," and They made me the driver, and this is what happened, dude. Linda Kasabian was only at Spawn Ranch for, like, a few weeks. Like, the whole story falls apart when you look at, Linda Kasabian was, only part of Spawn Ranch for a few weeks, and then all of a sudden you expect people to believe that Manson, like, trusted her to drive these people to these murders, and yeah, yeah, I think she died in, 2023, super recently too. And then the Tex Watson tapes, yeah, that's one of the greatest mysteries of, like, the whole story, is what's on those tapes. He had a conversation with his lawyer in private, and, it was recorded on tape. Those will never come out, though. Those will for sure never come out. And realistically, on top of that, as much as I wanna hear them, I do think Tex is such a liar that I could see those tapes being filled with, Tex Watson bullshit too. Yeah. Yeah, she hangs out at Spawn Ranch for 3 to 4 weeks, and then we're supposed to believe that Manson, the cult leader, he trusts her enough to have her drive to commit these murders. You know? No way, there's a reason she was only there for 3 to 4 weeks, and that's because she wasn't really that tight with the rest of the gang. There's a reason that she's only there for 3 to 4 weeks, and then these murders pop off, and it's because she's one of the guiltiest people, you know? She was the storm of negativity that rolled into Spawn Ranch, and then this shit happens, you know? They'd been there for a long time before she got there, and bad shit was happening, they were always pretty much like a crime syndicate. They were always stealing cars and, stealing money. That was pretty much like the girls' jobs, was, like, go into town and, like, find guys with money. But, yeah, no, as soon as Kasabian shows up, people start fucking dying. Yeah, no, if she woulda read a book the thing is, if she woulda read a book, I wouldn't believe it. It'd probably be filled with a bunch of lies of her trying to exonerate herself even further. Yeah, no, yeah, she got out and she took off. Dude, she was done. I think she went to live up in Washington. I think she lived in Washington for the rest of her life. And I've heard some things about how she has a son who's, like, now a drug addict. Like, she pretty much just I'm pretty sure she lived out the rest of her life still doing drugs. Yeah, from the late 1980s, Linda Kasabian lived in Tacoma, Washington, using the last name Chios? Yeah, Chios. So she even changed her name. The 2016 Rolling Stone article on the current state of Manson family members still living. It was said that she had been living in near poverty. In his 2016 book, Sharon Tate and the Manson Murders, author Greg King recounted in October 1996 police raid by the Tacoma, Washington Police Department where Kasabian and her daughter Kuanu had been arrested after rock cocaine and a large bundle of cash in a dresser drawer were discovered along with a semi-automatic handgun and ammunition. According to King, Kasabian's daughter was tried and found guilty of possession of controlled substances and sentenced to serve time in Washington State Prison. So yeah, dude, even in the 90s, Linda Kasabian gets arrested with cocaine and guns. Like she was always a criminal. Her whole life, she lived a life of crime, and she was the luckiest fucking person out of that whole group that Vincent Bugliosi saw her in pigtails and was like, I'll make you the star." When, like, they coached her. They told her what to say. Vincent Bugliosi got her and said, "We need you to tell this helter-skelter story in front of the court." The whole trial is crazy. They were originally gonna use Susan Atkins. She was originally gonna be the Linda Kasabian. They were coaching her. But then they found Linda Kasabian and were like, "Oh, she looks way sweeter and way more innocent. We'll use her instead." And then Susan Atkins got, thrown under the bus, and Linda Kasabian decided she was gonna take him up on that offer. Yeah, the whole thing's crazy. The whole thing is fucking crazy. And it all leads to today, where Bobby Beausoleil is up for parole in Vacaville too. That's the funniest thing. I always forget how local some of this stuff is, to me anyways. I'm very close to Vacaville. Wonder if I could interview Bobby Beausoleil. That's what I should do. I should be trying to find a way to talk to Bobby Beausoleil. Hey, Bobby Beausoleil, you want to do an interview for my YouTube channel with under 200 subscribers? Actually, I don't think people in president would care about how many subscribers your YouTube channel has, but I should have at least been trying to write Bobby Beausoleil. You know what? I know a guy who writes to Bruce Davis. That's what I should do. I should hit him up and ask him what's it like talking to Bruce. I also know a girl who talks to Tex. She's like a devout Christian, and she talks to him about Christian stuff. I don't believe that Tex Watson is a Christian. I think he's just trying to rehab his image. But she seems to believe that he's like a diehard God fearing Christian man. Which, like I said, to each their own. I don't believe him. I think Tex is the worst guy of the bunch. You email with Beausoleil or with Bruce Davis? Bobby probably don't even know what YouTube is. No, I think they all don't. They have like computer. They have the internet in prison now. Pretty sure they all know. And I'm sure with Beausoleil being like a, damn near a celebrity in some of like the true crime circles, I'd imagine he at least knows something about like the internet. But it would be crazy, dude. Imagine going to prison like Leslie Van Houten. Imagine going to prison in 1970 and then being let out in 2024. Like, talk about fucking culture shock. Bobby. That's pretty cool. You email with him. I'd be curious. I've made an account on a website to like write prisoners before, and I've never actually used it. But I don't know what is he? And I'd imagine he's a fairly nice guy. I'm sure there's nothing wrong with him. I always got the impression that he was like a, like he wasn't. I never saw him as like a nutty dude or anything. Bobby has his own YouTube channel with all the music. Okay, yeah, I feel like I remember hearing that he makes music at some point. I mean, I always knew that he was a musician. I knew he was an actor at one point. Oh yeah, here he is. Dude, he got 1.4 thousand subscribers. He's literally 10 times ahead of me. And he's got a Facebook and an Instagram too. This guy must be rolling. This guy's probably pretty cool. Pretty cool in the prison. Gotta try and interview him. I would like to interview someone related to the story. I don't think Bobby Beausoleil would give. I don't want to say. I don't think he would give the true story, but he was in the Final Words documentary in 2017, which is also one of my favorite documentaries. I've mentioned that like 3 or 4 times this whole stream. He was in that, and he talked a lot about how Manson wasn't a cult leader. Last time he got recommended for parole, he said the first thing he's going to do is get a dog. Oh, yeah. I think that's what most people should do when they get out of prison. Shit, dude, I would like to get a dog. Hey, it's got a whole website, dude. My thing's telling me that there's now one more person on here. Whoever is in here that's not Proto Max or Casper Pooh Bear, speak now or forever hold your peace. I gotta get out of here in a minute anyways, so if there is someone else here, I'd be curious to know. His wife died just a few years ago. That's a bummer. That's gotta be a bummer when a family member dies when you're in prison. So I'm looking at his website. His website's actually pretty cool. Looks like a lot of his writings. He's got a SoundCloud. Oh, they've definitely got the internet in prison. This guy's hooked up. He's got all of his stuff. He's playing Dragon Ball Dokkan Battle in prison. Dude, that's what I'd be doing. I'd be trying to intake all the Dragon Ball Z I can get if I was in prison. Being in prison has to be, probably the worst fucking thing in the world. His and Sandra Good's son, Ivan, has his own restaurant down south. He looks like Bobby. Yeah, I've heard a little bit about his son, Ivan. There's a Facebook group I'm in where somebody talked about how they met him at one time. I don't think I knew that it was, Sandra Good's son. I think I just always kind of assumed that Bobby Busley had a kid, with someone that nobody knew who or whatever. Sandra Good has always been one of the interesting characters to me. To me, she seems like the most, like she's very down with Atwa and the environmental movement that Manson was kind of really into. I feel like Sandra Good is one of you know, her and Lynette Fromm. I feel like they were the most like on the same page as Charlie Manson, at least now, later on. Oh yeah, I've heard Prison in Europe is actually pretty badass. Sounds more like, yeah, yeah, exactly. Just don't take you're grounded. You got a TV, you got a computer and shit. You're pretty much just hanging out in your room all day. All right, it's fucking 8:30. I gotta quit saying I'm getting out of here. I gotta actually get out of here. I think it's just you two. So, I will tell you guys good night. Casper, thanks for coming by for the first time. I'm glad that you were in here to put some of these facts straight that I was missing out for sure. It's always nice to have some backup in the chat when I'm forgetting some of the things. Yeah, right on. Both of you guys. I mean, Protomax are always here, so always thanks for coming by. Casper, since you're new, usually when I leave, I hit the outro. It's a song. It's like a minute. You can take off whenever, realistically. But yeah, no. Thanks for coming by. Much appreciated. Right on, Protomax.
And we're all here today to groove and have a beautiful time together, and that it's only the beginning. Sometimes I think I'm drunk, and then I realize I am drunk. Sometimes I think I'm drunk, and then I realize I am